Weird identity of all, considering and that broken for 50 years. You know, that's just
because spouse like I know my daughter knows there.
And I'm I actually like playing.
My daughter looks like
That's
what it is. So it's your suburb injury.
Yes. Oh, and then you leave the opposite. Yeah, that's hard. Okay. Sure. I mean, it is still a fun, but it's like, you know, it's basically the first. It's not like this.
Yeah.
Like it's still, so we're gonna start hitting first and they start making their way to the totally. And it's like, you know, that's what right to Versal is burning, so it's.
It's also it's
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But we did them. You had so she must be doing the school. That's so nice.
This is. Yeah. I went from.
Oh, dear goodness. What?
Oh, okay, great. Maybe I have. Like like, oh yeah, the value in there. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm gonna talk to you. Yes. So, yeah, but. Oh, basically, so.
You want the backdrop?
It's fun. Of course. That's why I like generations and stuff. Yeah. 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 I have a whole.
Oh, there's a.
Yeah, and we put it back.
I don't know what those are for.
Excuse me.
Hello.
I want to take a photo.
Please.
I want to pretend I'm
Do it.
speaking. Out you go.
Don't even pretend.
Nope,
Just do
I'm just
it.
like, hold this shit. I'll just hold this shit. I'm now about to convene the most. This is serious shit, guys. Serious shit. I'm such a pro. I better move now before I get in actual trouble. Oh, no, it's not. Hey. Just look at this like that. These are the new thoughts of my life. There's one right here. We're all like. You need one by. Yeah. It's like being middle. Faster, faster. Oh my God, thank you.
Nima, you know how to go from like 1 to 1, right? Yep. You just hit laptop. Cool. Perfect. Sweet. Awesome.
Good morning. Susan here, are you here? Okay. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hi, everybody. Good morning, Blues. How are you doing? We said, right? I'm doing fine this morning. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Wow, what a day yesterday. And just thank you all for the amazing, our team has been so grateful for your feedback and the love you've given them. And I have for sure. And thank you all for being here this morning. We have an exciting, this is the kind of the culminating few hours now of the Congress. This is incredible work that people have already done, that teams have already done. And we have two speakers today who will talk about how to take this work to the next level in terms of the kinds of communicate, how to talk to people, how to appeal to the values that could build bridges, how to overcome barriers, and how to ask the really hard questions that you have to ask to win. Who do you have to convince? Who do you have to overcome? Who do you have to join? And so this morning, I'll go over it again after they speak, but this morning's work in teams is now organized by the three big questions. What do we want? What's working? What do we want to leave behind? And what's the future? And we'll see if there's not consensus, but some coalescing around commonalities across the themes of those things. Again, we don't have to force it, but you can think of it almost like we're trying to create a discussion guide for the next year or so for communities, groups around the country, around the world to use and to start to shape the agenda that we can get very specific about in the way that Professor Thompson talked to us about, so that in a year we have proposals, we have policies that legislators can go adopt. Maybe ahead of that, we can have city councils and states looking at them, maybe Mamdani after Tuesday. And we're open to thoughts. Let's not do it at the plenary, but we're like, what will we call it? But at the end of this process, which again, I'll go over again after our speakers, we hope to have 9 stories. And they're not going to be, they can be very imaginative and amazing, but they will have concrete components that will be sort of guideposts about overcoming barriers and tapping values and things like that. We are hoping to end the day with 9 stories of joy that talk to us and encourage people to have these conversations. So that's what we're doing today. And we're blessed this morning to be joined by 2 amazing thinkers. I think we're starting with Susan Sturm, who's a professor at Columbia Law School. She wrote the book that you all saw out there and is one of the innovators who created something called Theater of Change, which is a framework for groups to move through in thinking about their strategy and their ways of really encountering the difficulties and overcoming the difficulties of making deep change happen. So she'll start us off, and she'll be followed by Nima, who's I'm going to pull up Nima Shirazi, who's the communication strategist and media analyst he's a vice president at Spitfire Communications, which is, I was blessed to be trained by them about 20 years ago in a year-long process. Really visionary organization that's changed progressive communications and politics, including things like gay marriage, gun control, and other major social issues. He has worked specifically on at the intersection of culture, politics, media, and narrative advocacy and the arts. And he was a founding member of the Narrative Initiative and currently co-hosts the award-winning media criticism podcast Citations Needed, which is featured in the new book 101 Podcasts That Change How We Listen. So the two of them will be speaking to you from quite expert places about storytelling for change, about narrative for change. And then I'll come back and talk about how the breakouts will work specifically. And then we have an amazing report back process, which you will be all involved in, and some more art and culture to cement it and create it. And we're going to make our own dance by the end of this Congress. All right, with that, I want to introduce Susan. Come on up.
It is such an honor to be invited into this amazing community. Actually, this is a dream come true for me. Partly a dream to honor the work and memory of our dear colleague and the departed Lonnie Guinier with Gerald Torres. Oh, can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay, thank you. Got to be able to hear, right? Access is everything. So, you know, writing the book, what might be a few more copies are out there for anyone who wants them. If anyone wants them who didn't get one, just email me. I'll send you one. Okay. But I wrote the book out of some decades of struggling as a person who cares deeply about racial justice and who's always asking the question, should I be at the front of the room? And I wrote the book so that people who care about change would have some more wind in their sails. That was basically the whole purpose of writing the book. And the idea that I'm here with you, this is such an extraordinary group of change agents, and that the book can be a part of developing this shared knowledge, that's a dream come true. And I've been transformed by this experience. I am now a racial and environmental justice warrior. So this room has taken on a different meaning since yesterday morning. Just taking the feel of it. Taking the feel of what this room has already wrought. The commitment, the hope, the determination, the love, the deep respect for every human, the willingness to put our shoulders to the wheel, to share power. This space embodies what I call, in what might be, a microspace of justice. It's a mini version of the world that we want to build that's outside of this room. It's what Adrienne Marie Brown in Emergent Strategy would call a fractal. So what is it about this space that makes it a microspace of justice? And I ask that question as we start thinking about the stories we want to build. I think capturing in the moment, we are the story right now, is a powerful way to think about what we want the story to become. So first, the thoughtfulness and care in bringing us together around enacting a theory of change, right? We didn't just come together and talk. We've been carefully curated through a set of questions that name the unacceptable is. What is it that we want to change, that we have to change? And we've heard so many examples of what that is. But we really didn't organize ourselves around that because we all know what's wrong. We were organized around what is the world that we want to see. And we heard a lot of this yesterday, people imagining in very concrete terms, right up there, what's the future, about what is the world that we want to see. They set us up, the organizers, to experience it in the world. We are practicing democracy that we want to have exist in the institutions we're trying to transform. And this was set up so that the expertise and wisdom that is in this room is what's driving this conversation. Not those of us who are in front, but everyone who's in this room. There's a kind of humbleness, humility around grounded truth that's built into the design of this. So it's because of the intentionality of the designers, and I just want to express appreciation to Michael and Bennett and Laura and Diana and the entire team, because it is that they've modeled for us the kind of intentionality that I think we need to bring to this next step of the work. The space is set up so that we can't just talk. We have to make concrete, hard choices that will grapple with contradictions. And that's something I talk about a lot in What Might Be. There are these paradoxes that are built into doing this hard work of environmental joy, of racial justice. Nina Gwalingwa captured this beautifully, captured the paradox of racialized power. She talked about how important it was for adults to share power with children and the younger generation. She said, if children are taught from a young age that what they do matters and their voice matters, we can create incredible things. Let's uplift the power of children to drive change. They're going to take matters into their own hands. And then she said, and yet it's not fair to put that pressure on the children. So we have to both lean into our power as adults as white people, as people who occupy these privileged positions, and we also need to step back. That's a contradiction. As a white woman in a predominantly white institution, Columbia University, need I say more? I have grappled with that contradiction every day. We're also grappling with the paradox of racial salience. The name of this conference, Environmental Joy, is both a call to the universality of this message, and it's also implicitly and explicitly saying we have to continue to deal with race. We have to continue to deal with class. We have to both talk about race and talk about something bigger than race. That's a contradiction that we have to hold. And we're also in the midst of the paradox of racialized institutions. Here we are in Yale University. Look around. Look at the resources that are here. Look at the power here. Look at the way this power is exercised so that people will basically go out and do the very things we're trying to change. And yet, being here has enabled us to have this platform, to have this incredible convening of people who've come from all over the world. So transformative change requires us to grapple with these tensions rather than run away from them. And doing that is what it takes to achieve what I call full participation and what I think we're all here for. A world where people, whatever their race, their gender, their location, their class, their background, can fully participate, thrive, have their needs attended to, and contribute to the thriving of others. We've also really engaged in repurposing power. We're mobilizing a different kind of power, which we heard a lot about yesterday. The power the power that comes from people combining their voices to transform injustice and create the world that they want to see. Young people at the center, indigenous people at the center. And so we are right now in the story of writing for the future. We are doing it right here, right now. And so this is what we want to hold on to. And the question really we're grappling with is how do we make this happen in many other spaces and in the spaces that are not set up with the kind of intentionality that we've had the good fortune, the privilege to experience. So I want to just say a few more words about how we can make what might be a reality. How do we decide when you go into your groups? How do you decide what to do next? How do you frame the stories that will bring people together who need to be in the room? So these are offerings as conceptual tools. One of the things that I saw yesterday is that people are already practicing the things that I talk about in my book. And I think part of what we need to do is, first of all, elevate that knowledge and tell those stories so that it becomes something that's not only under the radar screen, but we create our own radar screen, which then transforms the larger narrative. So one thing to do that I think a lot about is asking the question, how do we forge linked fate? Now, linked fate is not my term. Linked fate is a term that was developed by Michael Dawson in Behind the Mule, which was about how Black people from all different races and from all different socioeconomic statuses and religions and geographic locations come together and vote similarly because they see that the fate of one dictates the fate of all. And the idea of linked fate, I think, with a lot more work can help link what we do to build those kinds of coalitions. Basically, how do we do some of the things that we heard about yesterday? Build relationships that enable people who think they're adversaries to learn how their ability to prosper in the long run is deeply interconnected. And so we heard about both what we want to leave behind as a way to have people see their linked fate. We heard about having to leave behind the bullshit. We heard about leaving behind competitiveness, zero sum, hating the politics, hating the corporations. Lots of people can come together around that, but also caring about the well-being of families, food on the table, children being educated, clean air and water. I'm just quoting from yesterday, right? So how do we build those relationships across the divides? We also heard about breaking bread with people you disagree with in ways that allow you to identify where do we share common interests very concretely? So we heard that again around connecting people who care about economic justice and environmental justice. What is the story that will deeply illustrate both the concerns about being able to feed your family with the concerns about having to deal with cancer in your community at disproportionately high rates? We also illustrated so beautifully the power of the miner's canary, Gerald and Lonnie's term, as a way to build linked fate. We heard about indigenous knowledge systems from Brandon, who came here from Hawaii to be the person speaking directly, because no one can speak in the way that you can speak when you're speaking in the first person for your communities. So everyone has an indigenous lineage. What a powerful statement. Everyone has an indigenous lineage. That made me think about my indigenous lineage. And that is such a powerful hook for driving linked fate. So I think that's a really beautiful example. And then there's the urgency of the moment. In Ithaca, New York, the community still remains fractured, with the police killing the community, and the community also engaging in violence with the police, and they hate each other. But they said, you know what, we can't continue to live this way. We can't continue killing each other. So even though we wish we didn't have to, even though we don't trust each other, we have to come together, because otherwise we're going to die. And I think we have the analogy to that when we're talking about, on a much broader scale, climate justice. So what is that could also be the message. How do we repurpose power in a way that lasts? That's something else that needs to be built into the narrative. And to me, this is the trick that enables us to move beyond the zero-sum scarcity mindset that we heard so much about yesterday. How do you convey that sharing power does not mean that you no longer count? It means that we all come together and bring the knowledge and expertise and wisdom that we have. We need to make that concrete. We need to show what that looks like in a way that I have been able to experience by bringing people who are directly impacted by incarceration, currently incarcerated, formerly incarcerated people, together with law students, to help lawyers and law students see that they don't know how the law is actually operating. They don't know what it is that's actually impacting communities. If they want a just system, which lawyers who went into this field because we care about justice want, we cannot do that without the power of the people who are directly affected by incarceration. And how do we tie ourselves to the mast so that when we come together with all of this goodwill around sharing power, we do something that forces us to do that even when it's hard, even when there are hard decisions to be made, building it into the design of the way you make decisions, building it into your boards, building it into how agendas get set and how people actually communicate. So this is hard work. This is really hard work. And it's also joyful work. And so I just think about, like, how do we think about this going forward? I look around this room and I see a group of what I call organizational catalysts. You are people who build bridges and weave dreams. And you have connections to multiple communities. You can speak to people who are insiders and also to people who are outsiders. You can translate across the different stories that people bring. You can use different languages, literally, as we heard yesterday, and figuratively, so that people who don't communicate easily with each other can actually understand what's going on. So we need to build more of these third spaces that bring together people who have feet in institutions that are holding on to power right now, and that are also in communities, and to build these kinds of mobilizing moments and build on these kinds of mobilizing moments. And storytelling is a critically important part of doing that. When we bring artistry in, we redesign the space that we're in. We build connections across people. And we make it possible to leave behind the aspects of the narrative that, if we use that language, we're actually recreating the problems that we think we're trying to change. We need to document these stories. And volunteering, anyone who wants to participate in documenting these transformative stories, that's something I would be very eager to do. We need to stay connected. So I think the architecture of this environmental joy movement is one powerful way to build this community of organizational catalysts into something that can have impact in fractal by fractal by fractal that then joins together to actually build a much larger transformational process. And I think, one last idea is zooming in and zooming out. This is really hard times. We are heavy-hearted at the moment that we're in. Sometimes it's difficult to have hope, but we have to be able to zoom into spaces like this where we can actually create microspaces of justice. But we also have to zoom out and see, wow, this is really counter the larger narrative. How do we see what we're doing in the larger context and understand that what we're doing might not be making change? And that's important because accountability to our values is really important. We can only act incrementally, right? We're not in revolution, at least most of the days. We're not able to start and reinvent institutions from whole cloth. So how do we do transformative incrementalism? How do we take a step, that next step, and ask, are we really building towards the transformation we want to see? Or are we taking a stopgap measure that will actually lead us back to the status quo? Are we throwing the people who are labeled violent by the criminal legal system under the bus in order to get a short-term victory, which will only lead us back to a racist status quo of mass incarceration? So what is the equivalent of that as you're doing this work? What's the story of tomorrow that will lead us toward the future that we're trying to rewrite? So last night, Gerald and I were standing around looking at everybody, looking at what was going on, feeling the energy, feeling the drive. And Gerald said to me, if Lonnie were here, she would be really happy. She would be really proud. She would be shoulder to shoulder with all of you. And I would just say her spirit is here and it will drive us. It will bring us, Lonnie loved to laugh. It will bring us the joy in struggle. That was so much her signature. And I just wish you all the wind in your sails for this very important day of work that you're going to be doing and the work that you're going to be doing when you leave after today. Thank you.
All right. Well, I basically don't have to say anything. That was great. Thank you, Susan, for that. And thank you, as you said, to Michael and Bennett and Laura and Diana for inviting me to be here today with you all. It is a real pleasure. We hear the term narrative a lot these days. Media narratives, cultural narratives, narrative shift, narrative change. What's the new narrative? But what do we really mean by narrative? It's a word and a concept that is thrown around a lot and I think often mislabeled and misunderstood. And so I'm here to dig into that just a bit so we can all have a shared lexicon as we move forward and as we think about the stories that we want to tell together today and beyond today. And, like any good presentation held on a college campus, the morning after Halloween, I'm going to start nice and easy for us all. It'll help us all deal with our candy hangover, or candy, I said, lingering sugar comas. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to watch a very short video together. It is 90 seconds. It has no sound. It looks really old school. And then we will talk about this video. Like I said, for those especially on Zoom, do not adjust your dial. There is no sound. You're not missing anything. But pay attention very closely because I want to discuss what we all see. All right, riveting, I know. What just happened? What did you all see? Shout it out.
The villain holding hostage, and the other one was also trying to remain free and help the other one get out. And then it looks like the villain got upset because the victim got away.
Okay, amazing. Who else?
All right. I felt that out of impatience, that led to the destruction of the whole structure. So the whole thing is centered on being patient. Patience and perseverance would get us to where we want to be.
Love it. Who else?
I saw domestic violence. That's what I sort of thought it was a mother and a child, or a father and a child, and some sort of scared kid hiding in a room, opening the door, wanting to come out and protect. That's what I saw.
Okay. One more, maybe.
Joyful day, everyone. To me, I saw that they were trying to all get into the box together, but something happened where the last triangle couldn't get in, and it caused one of the other triangle to come out, and it looked like they started fighting. And then they were just like, forget it, everyone's out, and they just scattered and left the whole project in itself, and it was over. But it looked, in the beginning, it looked like they were trying to all get inside, but it didn't happen.
All right. That's all amazing to hear. Let's think about what actually we just did for 90 seconds together. For 90 seconds, we watched some two-dimensional objects move around a two-dimensional space. There were 3 shapes. There were some lines. That's all. That's what happened. But you all told stories. We heard about violence and aggression. We heard about perseverance and patience. We heard about family dynamics, parents and children. We heard that those little shapes, the triangle and the circle, maybe there was a he, there was a she. They did something together. They wanted to be in a room together. We heard about destruction. We heard about hope, wanting to be all in the same space. But all we did was just watch some shapes move around a two-dimensional space. That is it. And so what this tells me is that, good news, you're all human in this room. Very few AI bots, I think. Because you projected those feelings, the fear, the hope, the patience, the winning, the losing, what we gain, what we want to achieve but maybe can't. You projected that onto that screen. Now, that test was actually created in 1944 by Smith College experimental psychologists Fritz Heider and Marianne Simmel to express how we receive and process information. It was called an experimental study of apparent behavior, examining the human propensity to ascribe intentionality to all things. And Susan spoke about being intentional in this space. Stories are essential to human nature. We as humans are hardwired for storytelling. We're storytelling pattern-seeking animals. Stories allow us to make sense of the world. It's why for millennia, we've looked up at the night sky and told stories of gods and monsters, of heroes and adventures. We need to, and we love to create meaning from randomness, from chaos. Storytelling is the common language of human experience. We seek to ascribe intent and agency, patterns and meaning to everything. Sometimes these patterns are called frames, mental models, categories, shortcuts, and stereotypes that shape the way we see the world. And cognitive science and neuropsychology, I practice neither, but I've read about them, and they say that stories and storytelling are inherently linked to human decision making. They help us understand and communicate our values. They can both deter and inspire. Stories can paralyze us just as much as they can mobilize us. Stories are really, really powerful, right? It's the reason why when we hear someone describe the day they had and they say that they were, running late and they had to catch the bus and it was a couple blocks ahead, but they started running. You're listening to that story and sometimes your heart starts to beat a little faster. It's when someone is describing an amazing meal that they had, describing the food. You were not there. And yet, sometimes your mouth starts to water, right? Stories tap into not only the meaning of things, but also physically affect us and the way that we move through the world. Compelling stories can not only illuminate our past and inform our present, but they can motivate action, right? To build better, more inclusive, more equitable futures. But stories, I think, are different from what we think of as narratives. And I think it's an important distinction to make in this work. Stories are discrete. They have characters. They have a conflict to overcome and a plot device. And good stories have payoffs, right? A conclusion, maybe a moral, a meaning, right? Stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. But narratives are the bigger picture. They're the foundational concepts and beliefs that allow us to understand the stories that we are hearing. Individual stories are immediately informed and understood according to the narrative that they fit into already, right? What we're bringing to the stories, what you all brought to those little shapes. The stories are imbued with larger meaning as instantly as they are received because of those pre-existing narratives, while the narratives themselves are further reinforced, strengthened, and entrenched with every new story that is told that reinforces it. And here's where I have to break some bad news to us in the room. We're not rational animals. We're storytelling animals, but we're not always rational. We are thinking animals, usually, some of us. But that doesn't mean we always think clearly, right? We react, we respond, we filter new information, new stories through what we already know, what we've already learned and perceived, how we already believe the world works, the collections of stories, the pre-existing narratives that we carry around in our minds and in our hearts. Those inform every story. And that kind of filtering saves us time and energy in our lives. If the facts that we're hearing, a new story, supports the narrative that we already believe, then we believe those facts. They become part of our larger narrative. But if the facts conflict with our narrative, well, then usually that's too bad for the facts, right? This is how genocide can be justified as self-defense. It's how extraction can be called innovation. It's how Cancer Alley is maybe a small price to pay for corporate profit. It's why a foreign power blowing fishing boats out of the water off the coast of Venezuela can be called part of a war on drugs, but it's actually about oil. These are about the larger narratives that are operating and the stories that are told, what they're animating all the time, right? Dominant narratives define and dictate what and whose stories are allowed in our discourse, which stories are encouraged, and whose stories are omitted, maligned, and marginalized, right? How we frame stories speaks to the narratives that we're trying to tap into. But there are also narratives of hope, of vision, built upon stories of solidarity, of strength, of right relationship, of courage, of community and collaboration. That's what this room and this space is. Stories of justice, stories of joy. They're stories of what is and also what must be. And this is where I think we find ourselves today, imagining possibilities that we must turn into inevitabilities. In his new book, Ta-Nehisi Coates writes that, quote, "The standards of enslavers, colonizers, and villains simply will not do. We require another standard, one that sees the sharpening of our writing as the sharpening of our quality of light. And with that light, we are charged with examining the stories we have been told and how they undergird the politics we have accepted, and then telling new stories ourselves." And so now is maybe the hard part. Now we have to make some decisions, right? Remember these questions. They're up here, right? Today, you're going to revisit these questions and start turning your answers to these questions into stories. Stories that tap into the powerful narratives of hope and joy. And as you do that, I'd like you to think about these things, this framework. Okay? Who will you be telling your story to? And what values do you have in common? Stories are about communication and connection. And as we saw earlier with those little shapes, stories can be interpreted in a million different ways, depending on who's telling them and who's receiving them. So always think about what connects you to your audience. How do you get them nodding along with you right from the start, without pandering or saying something that you yourself don't believe, right? Stay true to your values, but how do you connect that value to their values? What are you tapping into? Next, think about what might hold them back from believing what you're saying is possible. What barrier might they have to act alongside you? And how are you going to break through that barrier without repeating it and inadvertently reinforcing it? How can you get past the, yeah, but kind of response? For instance, you say, everyone, regardless of where they live, what they look like, how much money they have in the bank, deserves to live in safe and healthy communities. And they're nodding along. Shit, yeah, right? Of course. But they may be thinking, yeah, but it's just not the way the world works. Now, what you don't want to say out loud or write into your story is a response where you say, now I know you think that's just the way the world works, but blah, 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 blah. You just reinforced their prior. You just gave oxygen. You just gave away your own voice to their own fears and reinforced it. Right? You confirmed their barrier. They will then stay fatalistic and disengage regardless of what comes after. So instead, maybe preemptively overcome their doubt with a barrier breaker. Like, we know that when communities organize to build power and make decisions about their own neighborhoods, control their own budgets, inform public policies that affect their families, we know that their health and their well-being improves. Right? It doesn't have to be that way. But you don't have to say, we know you don't think that shit's going to work. You explain how it does and how it will. Again, redefine the possible. And you got to make this concrete. People have to do something. Right? Name one, and I mean that. One thing that they can do right now to help make the change that we need to see. May not be everything, but it's something. Make it realistic and achievable, easy to do, but really impactful when done. And follow that up with your vision. What will the world look like when we take these collective actions together? And how does that future connect back to that original value? Right? How is the future that we're building together the articulation of that value that you share with that person? Now, in your breakout group, this is what you're going to be digging into. When things are at their bleakest, that might be now. I often find myself returning again to the words of Edward Said, who we saw earlier, who 4 decades ago wrote, quote, "In human history, there's always something beyond the reach of dominating systems, no matter how deeply they saturate society. And this is obviously what makes change possible," end quote. You, together, are that something. You are all the authors of a better future. And as the late Assata Shakur said, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. And I'll only add that until we win, let's rattle those chains as fucking loudly as we can. Thank you, everyone.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you both so much for that. And I just want to say our process that you've been going through has been very shaped and influenced by these folks. And I love the, especially calling in all those sources, Nima, some of whom we think of as very esoteric, but have very real things to say, and some of whom obviously we all know deeply. So I'm going to quickly just walk through how the next session is going to work, and then Bennett's going to give you all some just send off points to get. You've got basically 2 hours, and the breakouts now are reconfiguring. The sessions are reconfiguring into the 3 questions, and we've written them up. You'll be seeing, so you basically have roughly 12 or 12 items, or maybe some more, a little more or a little less, and you'll be going in together, sacred practice, getting to know each other, creating breakout circles. And in the first circle, we want to see whether you can get this down to a smaller number, whether there's 3 points that you think tie everything that's working together, or what to leave behind. Don't force it. And especially if you're having disagreement, just document it, because we want to generate conversation for the next year. We're not trying to make answers here so much as say things we all have to think about, study, write policy for. We're not writing the policy here. We're just saying this is where we have to do work if we want this next, if we want to leave things behind and stuff. So it's okay. But if you get to 3 or some number, then you're going to come back and report back together. Breakouts within your group. So let's say 4 groups within each question. You'll have your own candidates. You'll put them up. You'll again just see if you can consolidate, vote. If obvious, coalescing happens or winners happen, then you're done. If not, you discuss that a little bit more. And then you go back into breakout to tell stories about each of those things. And I think what we're doing there is we're actually assigning those out, correct me if I'm wrong, storytelling groups. So those at that point, you're just designing story in probably 3 breakouts within each session, right? Did I get that right? Okay. So and that's the storytelling and you have a table with those 4 elements that Nima put up. Your report out should be from each session, ideally or so, 3 stories that somehow touch on those things, but you're going to make a table too that has barrier breaker and vision and stuff in it. And then hopefully 3 of you from each of these sessions will get up and tell a story at the last plenary. And then we're going to maybe even turn that, can I reveal how we're going to interact with it? We may even turn that into a dance, something called a movement chorus that we have an expert in who's going to lead us in at the end as well. So we have a motion to represent the stuff we did here. And then we're going to write it up and try to start disseminating it and have people here take it. We had a couple, we tried to get some group leaders, national group leaders, to listen in and give us some feedback, but it's just been too hard today, so that's not going to happen. But we have people ready to listen to this, like Earth Day is thinking about making this part of how they do Earth Day around the US, at least in April. So that's the process. Together, try to narrow, agree on that narrowing, and then break out and design stories to tell us all from each of your sessions. We'd like there ideally to be roughly the same amount of people in each of these things. They're all very important. And then Bennett will come up and tell you final things, but I will say that the rooms are for what's working we're staying here. What to leave behind is in room 24, Sage Hall. And what's the future will be in Bowers Auditorium in Sage Hall. So what's working is here. And again, there'll be breakouts back together, etc. Questions? All right. I just want to thank Susan. Let's give Susan and Nima one more incredible hand. And thank you.
So it won't be long. The big thing that we wanted to mention is to follow the brochures for the rooms. We had some last minute changes for where people would be going. And same for the speakers. Please follow the brochures for the rooms. Lean on each other, lean on the scribes. And thank you for being here and have a good time deliberating. Appreciate it. Okay.
Let's just say 10
10.
or 10:30.
Okay. One last thing. The session will be from 10:30 to 12:30. Right around there.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. I'm glad we got all those different reactions to the video. Yeah.
Always works.
Yeah.
I always think it might go one way and then it's like, it totally,
Yeah.
it totally works.
Your poster up here. Oh, you're staying in. Okay, it's this one. Hi, good morning.